Hi everyone, today we'll be talking about solving multi-step equations. First, let's just do a quick review of how to solve a two-step equation. This is something that you guys learned last year in 7th grade. So when we're solving a two-step equation, first thing I like to do is draw a line through my equal sign. I always start there. Then the next thing I like to do is identify where my variable is. So that's always the next thing I do. I look for my variable and I like to circle my variable term. So here's my term with the variable in it. That's 7n. My goal is to isolate or get that term by itself. So in order to get this term by itself, that means I need to get rid of this plus 12. So when we solve equations, we want to do the inverse operation. So the opposite, or the inverse of adding, is to subtract 12. So 12 minus 12 makes 0. So when I subtract 12 from here, I have to subtract 12 from here. That's going to cancel these two 12s out because, like we said, 12 minus 12 is 0. So now I'm going to come down. This 7n is going to come down. And now I'm going to do this math problem. Negative 23 minus 12. And we're left with, whoops, ignore this for now. And we're left with 7n equals negative 35. Alright, so now I need to isolate the n. I need to get rid of the 7. And when a 7 and a variable are stuck together, it means they're being multiplied. So the inverse of multiply is to divide. So now our next step is to divide both sides by 7. And when we do that, that cancels out these two 7s here. So now we're left with n equals, and when we divide these, we get negative 5. So now we have our solution, n equals negative 5. Circle my answer. All right, let's try this one over here. So once again, I'm going to draw my line through the equal sign. I'm going to find the term that has my variable in it. So in this case, it's this term here, 4/5 m. That is one whole term right there. So a lot of times people see that fraction and that kind of worries them. But because it's a number, fraction is a number stuck to a variable, that makes that one term. Alright, so now we can isolate this term by undoing this subtracting 3. So the inverse of subtraction is addition. So we're going to add 3 to both sides. That cancels these out. I always like to draw a line under each of my steps. And then we are left with 4/5 m equals 16. Now there's a couple different ways that we can go about solving this. The quick way is to in order to undo multiplication, like we said before, is to divide, but we can't actually divide by a fraction. So the quick way is to multiply by. So the quick way to get rid of this 4/5 is to multiply by the reciprocal. So that would look like this. I'm going to multiply this side by the reciprocal, and I'm going to multiply this side by the reciprocal. Reciprocal is where we take the fraction and flip it over. Now I'm actually going to kind of put this up here, because what happens is the diagonals will end up canceling each other out. And when I put this up here, I can multiply these together. And we end up with m equals 20. Alright, so now I want you to come down here and I want you to give these two a try. Now this one here is a little bit different. So first thing you need to do is undo this division. Get rid of this fraction. When the whole problem is a fraction, get rid of that fraction first. See if you can figure out how to do that. Remember, these are just try on your own, so try it. This one over here, I'll tell you that that minus sign goes with this term and makes that negative 1/5, or makes that 1/5 w a negative 1/5. So keep that in mind when you try that one. Okay, go ahead and pause your video now. Okay, so now we're going to add in some more steps. Now that we've been reminded of how to solve a two-step equation, let's look at how to solve multi-steps. So to solve a multi-step equation, we first need to work on simplifying, and then we'll go into solve. So in order to simplify, the first thing that we're going to look at is to distribute. So remember, the distributive property is used to remove multiplication around parentheses. And I think there's a little typo there. I think that should be is. So our first step is going to be distribute. Once we distribute, we'll be left with a two-step equation. So then we're going to solve for the variable using our inverse operation, just like we did in the above problems. So let's go ahead and practice that. So I'm going to distribute my 9. I'm going to give it to the 2x. So I'm going to do 9 times 2x, and then I'm going to do 9 times, that's a negative 3. So, and I can write it out this way if I like. So 9 times 2x, and then minus 9 times 3. Okay. And so all I'm going to do is simplify this side. So 9 times 2x is 18, and then 9 times 3 is 27. And we end up with this math problem here. Now I'm down to that two-step equation. So the first thing we need to do is isolate our variable term. And we're going to do that by adding 27 to both sides, which will then cancel those out. And then we're left with 18x equals 108. So our next step then would be to divide both sides by that 18, which cancels out these 18s. And now we are left with x equals 6. Put a box around our answer because we're done. So I know this way is not the way that I necessarily have shown you the distributive property, but it's just kind of showing that work. So we distribute, and then we're down to a two-step equation, which we can then solve. So let's go ahead and try that over here. This time I'm going to distribute a 1/2. Well, multiplying by 1/2 is really the same as dividing by 2. So when I do 1/2 times negative 4, I'm really doing negative 4 divided by 2. So half of negative 4 is a negative 2x. Half of 8 is a positive 4x. So we're going to show that multiplication like this. And again, this is a step that we often just do in our head. I'm just showing the work here. So once we do that, we're now down to negative 2x plus 4. And once again, I now have a two-step equation to solve. So I can draw my line. I can subtract 4 from both sides to isolate my variable. And once I've done that, I'm now left with negative 2x equals 6. My next step is then to divide both sides by negative 2, which will cancel out these 2's. And we're left with x equals negative 3. And I can circle my answer. I want you to try these next two problems on your own. Go ahead and pause the video now. Alright, let's take a look at the next page. Alright, so now we're going to go to that second step of simplifying, which is combine like terms. So again, we've already learned how to distribute and combine like terms. So we're just taking those two concepts and we're now going to build on them and put them into an equation. So when we have like terms to combine, we can identify and combine our like terms and then solve using inverse operations. So at this step, once I've combined my like terms, then I will be down once again to that two-step equation that I can easily solve. So the way that it's done here, we're going to kind of skip that part of showing the work of combining the like terms, but you can use any method you want to combine those like terms. You can use that grouping method that I've taught you, or you can use another method that you've used. Now the nice thing that's with this problem, with the way it's set up, is my like terms happen to be next to each other. One of the key things we have to remember about like terms is they have to be on the same side of the equal sign. So sometimes what I like to do is put up a wall, an actual wall, and just cover up one whole side of my equation. And when I leave it with this, I can now easily see that 8x minus 4x are my like terms, and then 15 is by itself. I'm not going to count whatever's over here on the right side. I want my like terms have to be on the same side. So when I take care of this, 8x minus 4x just gives me 4x. So I'm left with 4x plus 15. Now I've simplified this side. Once I'm down to two different terms, it's been fully simplified. Now I can remove this covering from the right side, and I can see that I'm down to a two-step equation. So to isolate my variable term, I'm going to subtract 15 from both sides. That cancels out these guys. And then we are left with 4x equals negative 20. Next is we can divide both sides by 4. And once we've done that, we are left with x equals negative 5. All right, let's take a look at the next example. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to draw my line, and my line, remember, is that wall. But sometimes it is nice just to cover up the one side, so I can put all of my focus here. So this time, my like terms are that negative 10c and that minus 8c. So this is where, if you want to, you can use that strategy that I taught you, group them. You can rewrite them in a different order, or you can just do the math from where they are. So when I look at these, and let's see if I can circle like this. When I look at these, I've got negative 10c, and then its like term is this minus 8c. So they're the ones that would get grouped together. If I were to take out that plus 5, if that plus 5 was not there, my math problem would read negative 10c minus 8c. So I could put that in my calculator, negative 10 minus 8. And that gives me a negative 18c. And then I can bring down my plus 5. All right, now I'm down to two terms that are not like terms. So I can uncover this side, and now we have a two-step equation to solve. So I need to isolate my variable term. So I'm going to undo my addition by subtracting 5. Oh, sorry about that. Let's try that again. All right, so now I can subtract my 5. Trying to move this up a little bit. There we go. Subtract 5 on this side. These 5s cancel out. And then I just like to draw my little line. And then we are left with negative 18c equals 54. Next step is to divide both sides by negative 18. These cancel out. And we are left with c equals negative 3. And just popping up all the other stuff we had. Okay, so now I want you to go ahead and pause the video now to complete these two. All right, let's put it all together. So when we solve a multi-step equation, the first thing we need to do is simplify. Remember, simplify takes two steps. First, we use the distributive property, then we combine like terms. So I like to use this and say that we are distributing. I'm going to do this. Or not distributing, what am I saying? Simplifying. So these two steps combined are just simplifying. All of this happens on one side. So I always break it down to a two-part process. First, we simplify. Then we solve. So we simplify by using the distributive property and then combine like terms. Once we've done that, we'll be down to a two-step equation. So then we go to solve mode and we solve for the variable by applying inverse operations. All right, so let's give it a try. So here I'm going to take my 2 and I'm going to distribute it. I'm going to give my 2 to the 2x and my 2 to that negative 2. So if I were to show what that looks like, it would end up looking like this. So now I can simplify this down. 2 times 2x is 4x, 2 times 2 is 4, and I bring down my x equals 6. All right, now we have to combine like terms. So we've distributed. Now let's combine our like terms. Again, this step here is a step that we don't always show. This is something that we often just do in our head. So we come down here, and I look to see who my like terms are. In this case, I have got that the 4x and the plus x. So I've got my 4x and this plus x. They're my two variable terms. They're the ones that I would group together if I use that other strategy. So 4x plus x gives me a 5x. I bring down my minus 4 equals 6. Now I'm down to a regular two-step equation. I'm going to draw my line through. And now I can solve to isolate this term. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. That leaves me with 5x equals 10. Now I can divide both sides by 5, which cancels out these 5's. And then we're left with x equals 2. So once again, just as kind of a repeat, first part of our process is to simplify. We simplify by applying the distributive property and then combining like terms. So just like when we simplified before, we do the distributive property and then combine like terms every single time. Then we can go to solve mode and start using our inverse operations. All right, let's take a look at this one. So again, I'm going to simplify first. I'm going to draw my line in just to kind of give me that wall, because that means that when I'm simplifying, it all has to be on one side. And if it helps, I can even use my cover up. I can cover up this whole side and just simplify this. So when I simplify, I'm going to do 2 times x, and then I'm going to do the 2 times 4. And then I can bring down that plus 6x. So it ends up looking like this. Now I can simplify that a little bit more. So I can do the 2 times x and the 2 times 4. And it gives me this problem here. Now I can combine those like terms. I've got my 2x, and I've got plus 6x. So 2x plus 6x is going to give me 8x. And then I can bring down my plus 8, and that's all going to equal that. All right, so now we can isolate our variable term. And I'm going to slide this over because nothing's really lining up for me. I can subtract 8 from this side. And then I can subtract 8 from this side. And when I do that, these 8's cancel out. I can draw my little line. And now I'm left with 8x equals 64. My last step is to divide both sides by 8. And when I do that, I'm left with x equals 8 as my final answer. Okay, so once we go to put it all together, key thing is, first you distribute, Then you combine like terms. Like terms must be on the same side. Then we start our solve process. That's when we start using our inverse operations to get terms from one side of the line to the other side of the line. All right, if you turn to the last page, there are two more problems left. These two problems are your try on your own. Since this is the end of the video, you can stop now, and I will see you in class next time.